Hi, I'm Hobie1. This is Red Share Reading. Today I'm reading The Black Book of Secrets by F.E. Higgins. Glasses? Check! We are on chapter 15, Wagging Tongues. Let's go. Polly would have liked to spend as much time in the shop as the Sourdoffs. But while Elias and Ruby were happy for Joe to entertain their boys, Jeremiah was not so lenient. And Polly's visits were shorter and less frequent. She and Ludlow still enjoyed their brief chats over the counter, although, actually, it was more a case of Ludlow listening and Polly talking. For once she got started, it was no easy task to stop her. "I don't know what it is about this place," she giggled more than once, "but every time I come here, my tongue just runs away with itself." Ludlow liked to listen. He was curious about the village and its inhabitants, Jeremiah in particular, and Polly was more than happy to tell him about the goings-on in the large house down the hill. She told him of Jeremiah's habits, generally bad, and tempers the same, and unreasonable demands, many and often. Ludlow soon realized that life had not treated Polly well. She was bright, but suffered the disadvantage of little education. In those days, ambition wasn't as free and easy as it is today, and although Polly was far from satisfied with her lot, she was resigned to it. Her parents had died when she was only a baby. Lily Weaver, the local seamstress, had taken her in. Lily taught her to sew, and indeed Polly showed some skill. But Lily quickly realized there wasn't enough work in the village for the two of them, and soon Polly became nothing more than an extra mouth to feed. Fortunately, or rather unfortunately for Polly, it was about that time Jeremiah Ratchet made it known that he was in need of a maid. So Polly had wrapped up her few belongings in an old spotted linen cloth, tied it to a stick, and walked across the road to Jeremiah's, where she had lived and worked for the last 6 years. "It's not as bad as you might think," said Polly. "As long as I do what I'm supposed to, then he can't complain overmuch." But Polly always looked tired and hungry, and Ludlow almost felt guilty that he worked for Joe, Jeremiah's complete opposite. "It was better when Stanton Cleaver was around," Polly told him one day. "Stanton Cleaver?" asked Ludlow. "The butcher's father. When I first came to Jeremiah's, he and Stanton used to eat together nearly every night of the week." It gave her some peace. "What happened to him?" asked Ludlow. "He had a bad heart. At least that's what Dr. Molderd said, and he died very suddenly. They buried him so quickly that no one even saw the body. Everyone thought Stanton was a great man. But I'm not so sure. He treated Horatio, his son, really badly. Anyway, after Stanton died, Jeremiah didn't have any more friends in the village, so he started gambling in the city. He's still at it. And I never know if he's going to come in late or early, but whatever the time, he's always drunk." She sighed. "I don't understand why you left the city to come to this place, stuck out here in the middle of nowhere. Was it really that bad?" "It's much worse than I told you," said Ludlow grimly. "You'd hate it, Paul. It's full of all sorts of nastiness." "Some people say that you left the city because you committed a crime," said Polly. "They think you're on the run." Ludlow frowned. "Let them think what they want, and be damned." "And what about Joe?" she persisted. "Where did he come from?" Ludlow shrugged. The few times he had asked, Joe had avoided the question very successfully. Ludlow did not actually know very much about his new master. Even in the exotic stories he told to the Sourdoff brothers, Joe somehow managed to give little away. "Anyway," said Polly with a grin, "no matter. He's got Jeremiah in a proper lather. You should hear how he curses the pair of you. One day, he will really explode." Whatever Jeremiah Ratchet thought of Joe and Ludlow, the villagers made good use of the pawn shop. True, they owned little of any great value, but unlike most pawnbrokers, Joe took everything he was offered, even the most ridiculous and worthless items, the moth-eaten, slightly moldy stuffed cat being one such example, and paid good money as he promised. Ludlow could not imagine even Limbert Jellicoe accepting such a pledge. As most customers came in wheezing after climbing the hill, Joe instructed that a chair be set by the door, and it was gratefully received. Ludlow watched them from behind the counter, gasping and coughing and complaining. Eventually, the noise would subside, and they would come over to show whatever sorry item they had brought. Joe would hold it up to the light and turn it this way and that. Sometimes, but very rarely, he would take out his jeweler's glass and examine the object close up. All the while, the customer stood by, hardly breathing, fists closed and white-knuckled, hoping that Joe would take the useless object. He did, of course, and they were all grateful. Immensely so, and thanked Joe profusely. Often that was the end of business, and they would back out of the door, still saying thank you. But sometimes the person hung on, hopping from one foot to another, pretending to be interested in Saluki. If this is interesting to you, please be sure to boop the like button. You'll help the video spread to other people, and thank you very much. Eventually, Joe would turn around and ask, quite innocently, "Is there anything else?" The hint of a smile danced at the corners of his mouth. Invariably, they would talk about Jeremiah Ratchet. "You must be a brave fellow, Mr. Zabadow. There's not many would stand up to Jeremiah." They were referring to that first day when Joe had dared to disagree with Mr. Ratchet. It had made a great impression among the villagers. Joe's response was always the same. "I simply stated the truth. He's thrown another family out on the streets, you know." They would continue, undeterred by Joe's apparent indifference. "At least, he had those brutes do it for him. They wear masks over their faces, so we don't know who they are. And for the sake of a few pennies rent, Mr. Zabadow, it's not right." If they expected Joe to do something about it, they were disappointed. He merely shook his head, sadly. "A terrible business," he said. "A truly terrible business." That is the end of Chapter 15. Thank you for joining me. I'll catch you again in Chapter 16. Bye.